Should you pay more for an RTX 5070 in your next gaming laptop, or should you save some cash and get the cheaper RTX 5060 instead? I've compared both in 25 games at 1440p and 1080p to find out. The RTX 5060 and 5070 laptop GPUs both have 8 gigs of VRAM running at the same speed, but the higher tier 5070 has 38% more CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores compared to the lower tier 5060. The 5060 clocks a little higher, which I suspect is because it's got fewer things like CUDA cores to share its power budget with. And both of these GPUs have the same 115 watt maximum power limit. More power equals more performance. This graph shows the 3D Mark TimeSpy graphics score from each GPU at different power levels. If we've got these GPUs in thinner or cheaper laptops with lower power limits, then the 5070 scores 12% higher than the 5060 with both running at 50 watts, the lowest power level they both support. With both maxed out at 115 watts, the 5070 has a similar 13% lead, so the performance difference is fairly consistent between them with the same amount of power applied. But spoiler, we do actually see a bigger difference with real games. This also means that a maxed out 5060 at 115 watts would perform about the same as an 80 watt 5070 in this test. I've got two Lenovo Legion Pro 5i gaming laptops to make this comparison as fairly as possible. Apart from the obvious GPU difference, both laptops have the same CPU, same RAM, same SSD, same cooler, and same battery. And if we find a good deal on gaming laptops with either of these GPUs, you'll find them on our gaminglaptop.deals website. Save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. I was surprised to find that the RTX 5060 laptop in red was using anywhere from 6% to 27% more power at the wall across 6 different games. You'd expect the higher tier 5070 laptop to use more power, but that wasn't the case. And I double-checked all of the results. I even compared the 5060 power results from a different laptop. But same deal, it was using more than the 5070 laptop. This results in the 5070 laptop in purple being much better from a performance per watt perspective. Not only does the 5070 provide more FPS in games, as you'll see shortly, but it's doing this while using less power too. This is also seen in the battery life while running a game. The 5070 laptop lasted 7% longer than the 5060 laptop, as it's more power efficient. More power means more heat, so the 5060 laptop in red was slightly warmer in most cases, though the difference isn't that big. Both laptops have the same cooler and same fan profile, so these are comparable results. Both laptops are allowed to run their GPUs up to the maximum 115 watts, though we didn't see all 6 games tested demanding full power at 1440p. And just like we saw on the spec sheet earlier, the 5060 in red was reaching higher clock speeds in all of these games. Alright, let's dig into the games. Starting with Stalker 2 at high settings, which has the second biggest difference between the two GPUs out of all 25 games tested at both resolutions. The 5070 laptop was 25% faster than the 5060 at 1080p and 1440p, so quite a bit more of a difference than what we saw in the 3D Mark power scaling earlier. But this is just one game. Cyberpunk 2077, on the other hand, only saw below average differences. At 1080p, the 5070 was 16% faster compared to the 5060, but at near 100 FPS on ultra settings, the 5060 is still running very nicely. The 5070 has a smaller 10% lead at the higher 1440p resolution, and again, the 5060 is still able to deliver above 60 FPS at ultra settings without even using upscaling. Not bad at all. If we instead use the ray tracing ultra preset with some DLSS, DLSS, the 5070 still has a similar 11% lead over the 5060 at 1440p, though interestingly, the dips in performance, as shown by the 1% lows, were now a little better on the 5060. I double-checked the results, and this was consistent, so a bit more stability with the 5060. The only other game where this happened out of the 25 tested was Hogwarts Legacy, where the 5060 had better 1% lows at both resolutions. Both laptops are running their GPUs at around 110 watts here, but the 5060 laptop is running its processor at 60 watts, while the 5070 laptop's processor is running at just 30 watts. I can't explain why the 5060 laptop is using more CPU power in this test, while the 5070 CPU is slacking. All I can say is I tested it on 3 separate occasions and got the same results. Not sure if it's a bug with the game or the laptops. In any case, this was the only game this happened in. Meanwhile, some games like Baldur's Gate 3 don't care about the GPU much at the lower 1080p resolution, and depend more on the processor. This is why both laptops were basically identical at 1080p, but then at 1440p, once the workload becomes more GPU bound, the 5070 had a bigger 13% lead over the 5060. Marvel Rivals was still able to hit 60 FPS on the 5060 at 1440p ultra settings without any upscaling, but the 5070 was 20% faster in terms of average FPS. Even the dips in performance, shown by the 1% lows, were higher than the average FPS coming from the 5060, but still, this doesn't make the 5060 unusable or anything like that. It's a similar deal in Flight Simulator. The 5070 laptop's 1% lows are ahead of the average FPS coming out of the 5060, but this game had an above average lead on the 5070, with a 21% higher average FPS at 1080p and 23% higher at 1440p. Black Myth Wukong was tested with the game's benchmark, and although the 5070 was just 10% ahead at 1080p, there's a much larger 37% uplift to the 5070's 1% lows, which again just means the higher tier 5070 is more consistent with more stability. But the difference at 1440p was much smaller. In fact, the smallest gain for the 5070 at this resolution out of all 25 games tested, with just a 6% lead. The gap gets bigger with ray tracing and DLSS on. The 5060 still delivers 60 FPS with RT on low, which does visually enhance the game, but the 5070 was 19% faster at both resolutions. Apex Legends can hit high frame rates, and actually put the 240Hz screen in the laptop to use. The 5070 was 11% faster than the 5060 at 1080p, and 16% faster at 1440p, which is a fairly average difference. Alan Wake 2 was running with a 22% higher average FPS on the 5070 at 1080p, and 19% higher at 1440p, but the gap gets smaller to around 16 to 18% better with the 5070 if you're using ray tracing and DLSS. The 5060 still runs quite well at 1080p. Spiderman 2 runs out of VRAM on both of these laptops, as 8 gigs isn't enough for very high settings. I think this is why we see one of the smallest differences at 1440p out of all games tested. Both GPUs are bottlenecked by VRAM, so the 5070 is only 9% faster, but it's less of an issue at 1080p, so the 5070 is 25% faster, which is the third biggest difference at this resolution out of all 25 games tested. Alright, I think you get the idea. Instead of wasting your time individually talking through the rest of the 15 games tested, I'm just going to quickly skip through the rest of the results on screen now, so feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look at any specific game. The reason I test so many games is so that we can get a much more accurate average result from a wider selection of titles, which allows us to draw a better conclusion. In other words, more data equals more better. Let's take a look at the average differences next. On average, over all 25 games tested, at 1080p, the RTX 5070 laptop GPU was 16% faster compared to the RTX 5060 laptop GPU. 8 of the 25 games tested saw a 20% or more FPS boost with the 5070, but then then on the other hand, some like Baldur's Gate 3 really don't care about the GPU difference at lower resolutions like this. Stepping up to 1440p, and the 5070 laptop GPU still had a similar lead over the 5060, getting close to 17% faster in the 25 game average. The performance difference doesn't really change much. I was expecting it to be bigger as we're more GPU bound at 1440p. Here's how things look if we average the FPS from all 25 games together. This makes it easier to visually see the difference between both laptops. The 5060 laptop was averaging around 60 FPS at 1440p with my mix of high and mostly ultra settings. So it's definitely 1440p capable. That said, as I've shown in this video with Steve from Hardware Unboxed, the 8GB of VRAM in both of these laptop GPUs can be a limitation when gaming at 1440p, even at 1080p in some cases. It depends on the game and setting levels that you play at. The point is, the 8GB VRAM limitation is only going to get worse over time as newer games get more resource intensive. Unfortunately, right now, if you do want more VRAM, the only thing you can do is spend way more money on a higher tier 5070 Ti laptop, and not everyone has that kind of money. So then, is it worth spending more to get the 5070 in your next gaming laptop? Or should you save some cash and stick with the lower tier 5060 instead? Prices of both will of course change over time, so check those links below the video for updates and sales. You'll find the best sales on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update it daily so you can save money on your next gaming laptop. So check it out regularly with that link below. At the time of recording in mid-October, RTX 5060 laptops start from close to $1,100 US and go up from there. Though we have had some great deals on the deal site like this one for $950 or less. Meanwhile, the 5070 starts from closer to $1,300 US, but due to a lack of sales, it gets expensive fast. Honestly, some of these prices are a huge ripoff in my opinion. I don't think anyone should be spending more than $1,600 on a 5070, and even in that case, you'd want it to be a premium model. From a cost per frame perspective, spending $1,100 on an RTX 5060 gaming laptop provides similar value to buying an RTX 5070 laptop for $1,300. That is, you end up paying a similar amount per FPS of performance you actually get in games. Put another way, if you're spending $1,100 on a gaming laptop, you're getting better value with the 5070, at least in terms of raw gaming performance. Of course, there may be other differences and features you'd need to consider when choosing. So based on those lowest prices at Best Buy right now, you have to spend about 20% more money to get the 5070 over the 5060. Though again, it depends on the specific laptop, and you've got to factor in things like sales, which happen all the time. Is it worth spending around 20% more money to get 16% more FPS in games with the 5070? Honestly, I don't think it's too unreasonable when the amount of extra money you spend corresponds fairly relatively to the extra performance you get. But of course, it depends on your budget and what level of performance you're after. It's a tough choice. On the one hand, RTX 5070 laptops are severely overpriced unless you find a good sale, and spending all that extra money just to have the same 8GB of VRAM as the 5060 doesn't feel like it's gonna get you too much extra, especially with future games. But then on the other hand, if you're spending around 15% more money for a 15% FPS boost and you want that extra FPS, well, that's definitely a reasonable option too. I think it depends more on you and your preferences, but at least now you're armed with the information to make an appropriate choice. The 5060 is very capable of running modern games if you want to save some money. Again, at least in the instances where it's not limited by its 8GB of VRAM, which the 5070 also suffers from. The last thing that you want to do is spend your hard-earned money on a laptop that doesn't perform how you need it to and be stuck with it for years. Which is why I teamed up with Steve from Hardware Unboxed, aka the king of VRAM, to show the problems laptops like these face today and even more so in the future. And if you are considering spending more money for more VRAM, then check this one next instead, where I've compared this 5070 against a 5070 Ti. I'll see you over in one of those next.